Here you've got this other issue that if you pull these things together, it's costing the average family $500 a year. That's outrageous. And we're not fixing the problem.
Hey folks, it's Joe Fries here, host of the Deep Fryer podcast. Just wanted to set the stage for you a little bit before we jump into this episode. I've got Jess Ketchum, co-founder of Save Our Streets. It's a bit of an umbrella group for various other anti-crime groups around the province, such as Clean Streets Penticton here in Penticton. Did ask Clean Streets to come on this show, but they politely declined that request. We had to go a little bit further afield to get the guest. Jess Ketchum is from West Vancouver, but he's got a lot of knowledge about what's going on in BC. And he really set the scene for us in terms of where this group wants to go in places like Penticton. Here's an interview now. Welcome back to the Deep Fryer podcast. Pleased to be joined today by Jess Ketchum, co-founder of Save Our Streets. Welcome, Jess.
Thanks very much, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Just real quickly, Jess, tell us a bit about Save Our Streets and your role in it.
So Save Our Streets, I refer to it as a coalition of the frustrated, Joe, because we've been dealing with these issues that we're going to talk about. We've been dealing with them for so long without any apparent solution. And so people are really frustrated. And, it's not just in the lower mainland. It's not just the downtown east side. It's in Penticton. It's in Prince George. It's in Dawson Creek. It's wherever you go in our province, unfortunately. So, long story short, a coalition of the frustrated has come together and we formed SOS, Save Our Streets. And it's a coalition consisting of, we can get into this further, but consisting of concerned citizen groups and business. It's important to point out that it's business and concerned citizens. It's not just another business lobby group or advocacy group. And my role, I'm one of the co-founders, and I got involved because London Drugs, the president of London Drugs, Clint Malman, asked me if I could put some thought into what they should be doing, because they were just having a terrible time in some of their locations with crime and violence, not just in their stores, but outside of their stores in the communities that they serve. And, it's a long time family-owned business in BC, and they have a real legitimate concern about not just their business, but the communities that they work in. So we put some thought into that, and I went back to them with some ideas. And the idea was that they couldn't do it alone. They couldn't do it by themselves, that they needed company. They needed people around them. They needed more company and more companies, but they also needed that community component, which to my thinking is critical, that it is people being concerned about the deterioration that they're seeing in their communities, the safety of themselves, their families, their kids. So those are the things that brought us together, and we can talk about how that's developed since we kicked off.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I'll just pause for listeners. Jess is recovering from oral cancer treatments, so his voice sounds a little bit off. But he's turned that into a positive, raising some money for cancer research, and we'll come back to that towards the end. But first of all, so I got interested in SOS because it launched with a lot of fanfare. I believe it was in October. And you had the CEOs of London Drugs, Save On Foods, and anti-crime groups like Nanaimo, Clean Streets Penticton here in Penticton. They'd all signed on, and there was a lot of fanfare. And I haven't heard much about it since. So what's been going on since then?
So the initial phase of our plan, Joe, was to grow the membership. So we had to launch to get the word out, who we were, what we're trying to do, what our ideas were. And so the first phase was, if you're going to have a coalition, you better have membership. And so our first requirement was to go out and encourage organizations to join up. And I'm pleased to say we're approaching 60 different organizations, from Dawson Creek to Fernie to Coquitlam to Qualicum Beach. All over British Columbia. And that has been really gratifying, because what we found is that there's a real demand for doing something different. And so before we get into what's next, what we had to decide on was a strategy. What is our intent overall? So, if you go back in history on these issues, you go back to Vancouver, Mayor Philip Owen in 2000 announced the 4 pillars plan, right, to deal with the drug problem, the street drug problem, the illicit street drug problem in Vancouver. And that was prevention, enforcement, treatment, and harm reduction. Those were the 4 pillars. Well, I'd say that today we recognize that there need a lot more pillars because there are a lot more issues than those that are out there today that we have to deal with. But so that was in 2000. Between 2002 and 2010, there were 1,654 deaths from overdose. In those 8 years, we'll have more than that this year in British Columbia, right? So the 4-pillar system, apparently, when it was announced, good intentions, spent lots of money, but we don't have the results that we wanted, right? That he envisioned and that people wanted. So then you come forward to 2016, and we have a provincial public health emergency declared. I don't know about you, but emergency means you better hustle. You got to get things done. Then you got to go now, right? You got to get.
One would hope, though.
Yes, get out of the burning building now, right? That's emergency to me. Well, in 2016, there were 922 deaths from overdose in British Columbia. 922. And so far to the end of July this year, Joe, there's been 1,445, the most ever recorded in that period of time in British Columbia. So whatever it is that we've done hasn't worked. And I use the collective we because, we're kind of all responsible. And that's one of the things that the coalition really recognizes, that we all have a part to play. However, we know that what's been tried before by well-intentioned people, well-intentioned governments, spending tons of money. I mean, a lot of your and my taxpayers' dollars, but it hasn't worked. And, you get to the point where you get into all these debates about certain aspects of what people think are the solutions, and whether that's decriminalization, safe supply, SROs, you name it, judicial review. Well, it's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? We can't see any reform at all there, but hopefully that will come. But nevertheless, it's kind of like whack-a-mole because there's only so much broadband width for the public's consumption of information and even government. And so, you eat up so much of that bandwidth by debating publicly for seemingly weeks on end decriminalization. Take that one issue. I mean, it was front page stories, television, top of the line news every day, and it just kind of sucks the oxygen right out of the room. But we're not paying attention to the overall problem. So SOS says, look, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole of debating over all those individual issues, the pros and cons of decriminalization, the pros and cons of safe supply. We're not going to get into those debates. What we're going to do is say, look, we as a community don't have the resources to fix these problems. We don't, as a concerned citizen group or as a business, we don't have the expertise, the dollars that it takes. And by the way, we've already given you, government, the dollars through our taxation and everything, and that's what you've been spending. So we're saying we don't have those resources, but government does. Government does. They have smart people. They have lots of experience. They know what the issues are. They can do all the research, and they have millions of dollars that they can spend, or they can reassign, take it from elsewhere and spend it on these issues. So what they also have, which we as a community don't have, is the responsibility. It's a government's responsibility, right? So we're saying to government, we're not going to tell you how to do it. We're just telling you, get it done. Get it done. Fix the problem. And so saying that is easy. Measuring the success of how they go about that and whether or not they are successful or not takes some real key performance measures, KPIs, right?
Yep.
So apply sort of a business approach to this. So what we're saying is we're going to develop half a dozen key performance measures that will be done independently, that aren't just wishful thinking, but based on some hard data and research. And we're then going to use that to hold governments accountable. And we're not pointing at the provincial government itself, the federal government itself, or municipalities themselves. It's everybody. So, one of the problems that we've always had, you've seen it so many times, is that you have one level of government pointing to another level of government. We'd love to fix this, however, if only those guys would step up, right? Yeah. Well, that's all fine and good, and I get that. But do you know how much government spend on intergovernmental meetings and committees? They have the responsibility for establishing those relationships and making sure that they work. And when they do have priorities, we saw it with COVID. They seem to be able to wrestle things together. If it's an emergency, which COVID was, well, apparently this is as well. So, it's time for them to do that. So the first phase, Joe, was to establish the coalition. We now are up to, as I say, about 60 organizations, which I'm feeling really good about, around the province. This has happened over like a 90-day period. I mean, you're right. We did launch in October the 30th, to be exact. Yes. So since then, we've grown this exponentially, and I can't say it's from a whole lot of hard work. What it's from is a whole lot of momentum out there in the community saying we need to do something, and we need to do something differently. Because if we do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, you know what that's all about, right? Yep. Einstein that said that was insanity. Well, come on, I think, we're there. Yeah. So establishing the coalition, up to 60 members now. We're still actively, every day we're getting new organizations coming forward. The BIAs throughout BC, Business Improvement Associations, once they started coming on board, now they're talking among themselves, and more of them are reaching out to us and getting on board. And it's easier to get the business community engaged and involved and motivated and mobilized because they're already organized. Yeah. It's different for a community group that comes together in a community like Penticton just to deal with these issues. It's not like a business association that's province-wide that have those communication tools between them. But nevertheless, we have, quite a few of those organizations. So we've got the organization coming together. We've given it some structure. We're in the throes right now of having a society registered. So we'll have that, directors, responsibilities, all of those things, directors insurance, all those things that are important to allow people to come on board. But also we have an oversight council that's like a board of directors, an oversight council that consists of Clint Mallman, who's the president of London Drugs, is the chair, and he's my co-founder of SOS. We have Bridget Anderson, who's the CEO of the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, Linda Annis, who's the executive director of Crime Stoppers, Karen Kawicka, who's with the community group in Nanaimo, Ian Tossinson, who's the CEO of the Restaurant and Food Services Association of BC, and God, I'm going to forget somebody. I'm going to get trouble for it. Oh, Jeff Bray, Jeff, former MLA from Victoria. He's the president of Downtown Victoria, the BIA there, but also the president of BIA BC, the provincial organization. So a really good quality people who are just motivated to try and do something about this issue. They're on the oversight committee. We then have 3 working groups. We have a communications working group. We have a government relations working group, and we have a research working. That's sort of our structure. Yep. And that'll develop as time goes by. And as we see our needs develop, we'll have a finance committee as well, which I'm pushing pretty hard for right now. And when I'm talking financing, I'm talking about fundraising. We need we get some resources together. Not a lot. We don't plan on being a big spending group because we got so many professionals already volunteering, which is great. So that's kind of basically where we're at.
Excuse the interruption, my friends. This is just a friendly reminder that the Deep Fryer podcast is 100% listener supported this season, which means if you like what you hear, we need your help to keep it going. There are two really easy ways to do that. One is a simple e-transfer, $1, $5, $10, whatever you can spare. Send that to deepfryerpodcast@gmail.com. The other option is a $5 a month subscription on patreon.com. And in exchange for your $5, you'll get a newsletter every Saturday morning of show weeks called Penticton to a Crisp, in which I offer my humble opinion on the 5 news stories that actually mattered during the week that was. You can find more details of that on our homepage, deepfryerpodcast.ca. You'll also find out a bit more about where your money goes and what we have planned for the show in the future. Thanks for listening. So if I may, so Save Our Streets would sort of be like an umbrella group for individual groups around BC to help unify their voices, so to speak?
Yeah, not only unify their voices, I'm a big believer in one message, many voices. Yeah. And, as a communications guy, I just know that if you can have that one message and have everybody delivering that one message, you're going to get someplace, right? When you look at these various groups around the province, the business groups are one thing, but the community groups, they may be in existence because of a specific problem in their specific community. And so they haven't really stepped back and looked at the bigger, broader picture of how crime and violence is impacting communities around the province. They're really focused on their one issue. We have one group in Vancouver that's focused on one low-cost housing development. They're concerned about what's going on around that particular development. That's fine. That's a community issue. So what we've said to these organizations is that, look, we need to coalesce around a shared concern for the deterioration of these conditions in the communities. Yeah. We're not telling you what you should be saying about your specific interests. We may even differ from time to time on your specific, your position versus something that we might have. But since we're not being prescriptive in telling government what to do, we can bring these people together, bring these groups together, and over our shared concern.
Yeah. I'm curious, I was going to ask you if there's any particular policies that you're advocating, but then you mentioned the developing key performance indicators. So I'm wondering well, first of all, is there any specific policies you're advocating? And second, what would those KPIs look like? Are you thinking like things like overdose rates, petty crime, that sort of stuff? Can you just elaborate there?
Sure. So 2 things. We're not advocating for or against any one particular policy. That's what we're saying. We're not being prescriptive. So otherwise, you get down that rabbit hole pretty quickly about debating the pros and cons of that particular policy. And we say that sucks the oxygen out of the room, doesn't allow us to step back and keep our eye on the bigger issue. So there's lots of organizations that want to go down that route. That's fine. And they all play a role. They all play a part. And we're glad they're there, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, we're going to come up with KPIs to measure on a provincial basis the level of crime and violence that's being experienced in these communities. So it may be we're not announcing the KPIs to you today, but I'll come back on at any time in the Sure. But for example, breaks and enters. Are they going up and down, up or down? Crime associated with violence. So there's a crime committed and there's violence committed. Is that another stat that we can use that will be one of those measurements that will allow us to determine whether things are getting better or getting worse on a provincial basis, not just in Penticton, not just in Nanaimo, not just in the downtown east side, but province-wide. So one of the real challenges, Joe, is that we have a lot of police forces in BC. Yeah. We have the RCMP, of course, but we have a lot of municipal police forces as well. And what I'm finding is that they don't aggregate the information very well and reporting out on incidences. So we're having to talk with very senior criminologists from universities to try to identify which are the best KPIs to use. And we feel that if we have them advising us, that gives them real credibility. And so we'll establish numbers that can't be seen as being political. They're numbers, right? They're stats. And so let's look at those. 2 other forms of KPIs that we're working on right now. One is public opinion polling. And as you know, there's great stats, but we'd like to know whether British Columbians are feeling whether or not the crime and violence in their communities affecting them and their families, do they feel safer or not? Is it improving or not? So, that's a public opinion thing, but I can go out and measure that all day long, anytime I want, right?
Yeah.
So if we're able to measure that on a quarterly basis, again, good sample size, province wide, we'll have a good sense of whether British Columbians feel whether or not things are improving or deteriorating further. Secondly to that, and you do the same sample size every time, you do it on a quarterly basis, and you can measure that pretty easily, right? And that's graphable. I mean, it's easy. So the other one is a business survey. And we have these organizations like BIA, Chamber of Commerce. There's all these organizations that have membership around the province. We want to survey these businesses, small, medium, and large, as to whether or not crime impacting them has improved or deteriorated. And again, doing that on a quarterly basis, we want to make it very simple for business owners to report out. And again, you do the same questions quarterly, same sample size, so that you can track that and it's comparable. And so those two types of surveys, plus some data, KPIs, and we're good to go, right? And then we can say to government, here you go. Don't debate with us whether you want to do, more safe supply programs, or you want to get more police on the ground, or if you want to, go and try to get judges elected. Yeah, I'd like a few judges to think, gee, maybe they'll change and they'll make us go and get elected. Now we better respond. Anyway, I don't want to come down too hard on judges today, but I do have some issues around, that revolving door idea. It's really unfortunate that we're suffering from that. But anyway, I have my personal opinions that are not necessarily the SOS opinion. So, I think that with those KPIs, we can go to government and say, we're glad to collaborate with you. We're glad to help. We'll marshal our resources as best we can to support you in doing the right thing, but show us some progress. Show us some progress, and we're going to measure you, and we're going to hold you accountable. What a concept. I was in government as a staffer for almost 6 years in Victoria. I know the way government operates. I know, and I'm sure you do, I know politicians of every stripe on both sides of the floor, federally and provincially. And basically, we got good people, well-meaning people trying to do their best. And I disagree with some of the methodology from some of them. But, the fact of the matter is they want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But they're not held accountable very often. And I'm even afraid that elections don't necessarily hold governments accountable to the degree I think is necessary. But there you go.
Yeah. I want to get into the politics of it, but before we leave this, how soon do you expect to roll out those KPIs and you go to government and say, here, do better? Like, is this next year or how far down the line?
Well, I think that I would suggest that's a new year. That's probably January, starting off the new year that way. There's only so much bandwidth, as we talked about before, I talked about before, only so much bandwidth available. And with our launch, we're getting lots of media attention where, our need is to ramp up our presence, getting organizations, whether it's in Penticton or whether it's anywhere else in the province, raising the level of awareness of the extent of the problems in their communities and the cost. The cost. Joe, this is still really surprising to me, and we're still doing our homework on this, our due diligence. So you can't hold me to it completely, but we've done some work that would tell us that the cost of crime to business alone in BC, London Drugs, I'll use them as an example. I know that Clint doesn't mind. He's been very, very forthcoming with this stuff. They're paying $10 million a year more in security than they've ever had to pay before.
Wow.
$10 million. So you and I both know who's going to pay for that at the end of the day. Yeah. If Flint Mulman has anything to do about it, and they're really good operators. So, the number that we've been given is just shy of $500 a year for an average family. So, we debate all day about the cost of living, cost of groceries, cost of, gas, all those things. Well, here you've got this other issue that if you pull these things together, it's costing the average family $500 a year. That's outrageous. And we're not fixing the problem.
Yeah.
So I get, it's so strange to me that we have been unable to make real progress. But it's sad too, because you got so many people that they're just sick, right? They're ill. And I continually say to people, if you could wave that magic wand, and this is a very simplistic view, I get that. But if you could wave the magic wand and take those people who are facing mental challenges, if you took them off the street and took them someplace that actually took care of them in the way that they should be treated, if you did that, and you took the people who are addicted to drugs, illicit drugs, living on the street, if you took them out of that scene and were able to help them treat and recover from their addictions, so much of the problem would go away, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would just go away.
Yeah.
So, you've got very sick people on the street, and then you have the criminal element preying on them. And I say no room for sympathy for people who are preying on the sick. No room. I have no room. And don't talk to me about their human rights. I'm sorry. I mean, it's all over for them, and we have to do a better job of policing, and the judicial system has to do a better job of taking care of them as well.
Yeah. I'm curious about the reaction SOS has had from three groups: public, government, and police since launching. Can you just go over those?
Yeah. So government, we haven't had any reaction from the federal government as yet. We haven't had anybody that I know of contact us officially and ask to sit down or what were our plans. We haven't had that as yet. So A, maybe they don't have any interest. B, maybe they don't understand it's an issue. C, maybe they haven't heard of us yet. Anyway, we have not had any official communication from the federal government. Provincial government, we've had a number of people reach out, show some interest from government and the opposition. And, I think they're curious, like you are and others, about what are we going to do next and how's this going to play out? And all we can say to them is, look, we have hundreds of thousands of people represented by these 60 organizations that we already have in the camp, right? Yeah. And those people are very, very concerned, frustrated, getting angry. Many of them are very angry about what's going on in their own towns. And government better listen. So all we're doing right now is giving them a vehicle. And boy, once the wheels get rolling on this 16-wheeler, it's going to be hard to stop, right?
Yeah.
The Premier has said that he looks forward to meeting with us. We haven't asked for a meeting so far. He hasn't, again, to the best of my knowledge, nobody's reached out and said, be in my office next Tuesday. So, but we're fine with that. We're fine with that right now. And we know that we're getting into the Christmas season and bandwidth gets eaten up again as far as people's attention, and we're good with that. We're going to be busy pulling together our coalition further, growing it further, and developing our KPIs. And we have an events calendar, which you'll hear more about when we're ready to advise on what we're going to be doing over the next calendar year as far as some events. So I think you'll find that interesting as well.
Yeah. The reaction, have you heard from, I know, I ask about police because I know some police officers and they're as frustrated as anyone else about the situation on the streets. Have you heard from law enforcement at all?
So we have good connections with law enforcement. Our research committee is made up of loss prevention people from these companies. And Tony Hunt, who is the fellow who's responsible for loss prevention with London Drugs, senior guy, very well connected in that whole world. And they're talking to the police all the time. So it's not up to me to report out how frustrated police have indicated they are. But I personally know that, yeah, they're very frustrated, and we expect so much from them, and I don't think we give them the right tools. I've heard that over and over again. But so there's lots of frustration there, lots of willingness to cooperate. London Drugs was very involved very recently in the crackdown in Vancouver on shoplifting. They did this exercise to go and arrest a couple hundred shoplifters. And, people need to understand that shoplifting is not the way you and I think of, somebody stuffing a pack of gum in their jeans. Boy, I'll tell you, today it's a business. And you have addicts who unfortunately are just trying to finance their habit. And they're being given a shopping list by organized crime to go into stores and take high value items. And, that they're doing that to feed their habit. But it's the criminal element that's driving that program. And others very dangerously are going in late at night to retail stores and hiding. Huh. And when you stop and think about what that means that at the end of the day, some employee who's closing that store is running the risk of running into likely a high person who could be very dangerous. And you never know what can happen. We've had lots and lots of examples from retailers of staff people being attacked and injured. And, it's pretty frightening when you think about it. So you can understand why security costs have gone through the roof, because now you can't have one person doing that job of shutting down the store at the end of the day. You have to have at least two, and maybe security. And, depending on your location and your circumstance. So that's pretty frightening stuff.
Okay. So the reason I'm curious about the response from government is the NDP seems to have a secure grip on power in BC. They seem to have their own plans for doing things, their own ideas of how it should be done. The polls show if there's an election today, they might form government again. So how does that play into this? And is there room for groups like yours to influence the government still?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Short answer. Why do you think the government's willing to listen to groups like yours?
Because they're in an election cycle. And yeah, I've been there. I know that even when you are riding high in the polls, you have that nagging feeling in the back of your mind that maybe this won't last. And so you're going to be more and more sensitive the closer you get to an election, whether you're in opposition or in government. I know that. I've been in both. And so, yeah, governments will listen. And the beauty of our positioning of doing KPIs rather than being prescriptive as to saying you need to do X, Y, and Z, because if the government just comes out at the last minute and announces X, Y, and Z, what do? Down our tools and say thank you very much. And how many lives has that saved?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of with the idea of measuring success through very credible KPIs, they can announce all they want. That's fine. But let's show some progress. And the difficult situation that the government finds itself in is, yes, they are in power, but that means they're also responsible. So, show us the results. And don't just make announcements.
I should ask before I move on. I'd be remiss not to ask. Save Our Streets, you're not aligned politically with any party, correct?
No, absolutely not.
Non-partisan. Okay, good.
Oh, and we have senior people within SOS that are from a broad spectrum of political parties.
Yeah. Okay. Locally, if people hear this and they think, I want to help, I want to get on board. How can people help or get involved in this movement?
Sure.
Average people.
Yeah. So first of all, we've been focused on associations, right? Whether it be business associations, businesses, or associations, concerned citizen associations. However, we just appreciate anybody and everybody who wants to be of help. So I would encourage people to drop us an email at info@saveourstreets.ca.
Okay.
Very straightforward, saveourstreets.ca, and give us their name and contact information. We have a list of people for distribution of information. And so if we're holding events or meetings or whatever in Penticton, we'll reach out, make sure that these people from Penticton know about that. But also we'll come up with ideas as to how they can utilize their own social media to promote what it is we're doing, to promote the issues. And I think that people are just anxious to help. They don't know how. They don't know how to help. And that's one of the frustrations that they've had thus far. I mean, there are people in Penticton that I know who tell me that they've seen the community, some of the problems being experienced in Penticton, and they don't know what to do. They'd like to do something, right? And for me, Joe, this is a passion project. I get pretty passionate about it, and I just have felt for the longest time, why am I not doing something about it? What can I do as an individual? So Save Our Streets is my choice, and will allow me to sleep at night knowing that at least I'm trying to do something about it. And, everybody that joins with us, whether it's a corporation, an association, or an individual, can do the same thing. They can have that same sense, because we're going to really try to do things differently and try to make some progress here.
Yeah. Okay, new for season 2. We're asking our guests a series of personal questions to end off each interview, just to help people get a sense of who they are as people and perhaps get some life tips. But before we hit record with Jess this morning, he was talking about his cancer journey and raising $1.5 million for cancer research. So before we jump into the 4 questions, tell me about your fundraiser.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. That's a great opportunity. I had a cancer called squamous cell carcinoma, which is a cancer caused by a virus. And it was the tumor was under my tongue, deep under my tongue, the base of my tongue, where I had no physical sense that it was there. I was just getting headaches and earaches on one side. And we thought it was a sinus problem. And because it was during COVID, I couldn't see a doctor. I couldn't get in for scans, and on and on and on. So it got to the point, it was stage 4. And so by the time I got in and had scans confirming what it was, my doctor said, get your house in order. This was real serious stuff, right? So I did. I had the distinct advantage of having spent 5 years on the BC Cancer Foundation Board of Directors. And I was chair for three of those years. I had done that because of cancer in my family previously, but nothing for me. I was invincible. Apparently not. So anyway, I got this diagnosis, the worst news you can get, I'll tell you. And then I was given 35 radiation treatments every day for most of the day, radiation and chemo on the same day for 7 weeks. And well, not chemo every day, but I was in there 5 days a week for 7 weeks. And great people, great treatment, all those things. I have no criticism of the people who are treating me. I have nothing but wonder at what they do and how good they are at it. Having said that, I'm an optaholic. I'm an extreme optimist. And since I wasn't as invincible as I thought, I was going to at least pick up my socks and beat this thing. And so many people refer their cancer as a journey. I think it should be saved for good times. And this is going to be a good time. So I'm a project guy. So I turned it into a project. So I have a written plan. I have tactics. I put together my team. I have my KPIs, and I developed the plan and went to work. Decided that my job was to do as I was told by my team, and so I did. And I was extremely focused on doing that. And I had a scan 2 weeks ago. Met with my oncologist a week ago, and no sign of cancer. That was a full body scan. No sign of cancer anywhere. I had had the tumor, plus I had lymph nodes on both sides of my neck shot. So the radiation is what affects my mouth a bit because I have some scar tissue along one side of my tongue.
Wow.
So while I'm in there getting all this treatment and talking to my oncologist, and I had three because I had a radiation oncologist, chemo oncologist, and then I had a trial oncologist. I signed up for a trial, a clinical trial, just because I'm a brute for punishment, I guess. But anyway, I thought that I should do that. That was another part of my project, right? So I turned that into a positive. So I was trying to turn my negative into something that would work for people down the road. So talking to my oncologist, I found out that there was very little known about head and neck cancers and developing from this virus. And it turns out that 75% of Canadians carry the virus, but a very, very small percentage actually develop cancer. And they don't know why. So I said, well, how come you don't know why? Come on, that's pretty basic. They said, well, we don't. We have to do more research. So I said, well, what does it take to do that research? They said, well, it takes money. So I said, well, look, we're willing to participate in that, my wife and I, and we have some friends. And so we went to work, and the cancer agency already had a plan coming together for a research piece, which involves the Michael Smith Genome Center here in Vancouver, where they can sequence the genome of cancer tumors. And so the oncologist working with the Genome Center, and that's what they're doing. And so they needed $1.5 million, and we've raised $1.5 million. So what it means is that that research won't mean anything for me, but well, I'll tell you, I've learned that there are so many people that are suffering from this form of cancer and other head and neck cancers, and this research is very, very positively going to help them. Yeah. And so the cancer that I have, they don't know what causes it to go from the virus to cancer, and they also don't know why there's a fairly high rate of reoccurrence. So I'm so far so good, but the fact of the matter is that if somebody is diagnosed, they're being asked if they would like to participate in this trial that we're doing. They've hired a specialty trained nurse who's talking to patients right as they've just been diagnosed, which is just a tough time, whether or not they would be willing to do another biopsy that would be used just for the research. So, you have a biopsy done, which is not a very pleasant thing. You have the biopsy done, and that's to prove what it is you have, and whether your tumor is malignant, and if it is, what kind of cancer is it? And so now you need another biopsy to be able to be used for this research. And then if it reoccurs again, the cancer, you need to be able to biopsy it again. So people need to agree to go through some pretty uncomfortable procedures, but it's worthwhile. And they've already signed up, I think it's 17 patients at BC Cancer to go through this process. And I'm told that in lots of trials, North American-wide trials, they might only sign up 500 a year patients. So they're very pleased with where they are here. So if anybody wants to deal with their year-end philanthropy and donate to the program, whether it's $5 or 50,000, you can Google my name, Jess Ketchum, BC Cancer, and our personal page will come up and show you how to do that.
Okay. Let's add a little more fun questions here. The four questions to leave things off, to fill in the blanks. So my first question for you is this: I saw blank in Penticton and wished blank had that too.
So I'm a car guy. I was at the Penticton car show, the one along the beach there.
Yeah.
And I saw a 66 427 435 horse Corvette, and I wish I had that.
Okay, next question. My most spectacular failure was blank, and it taught me blank.
Oh, yeah. So my most spectacular failure was the election of 1991.
Okay.
When the Social Credit Party went down in flames.
Yeah.
And I was very involved with that.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten very involved. It was a bit of a process. And a good friend of mine basically begged me to come back and get involved with the party after I had a bit of a falling out with the premier of the day, Bill Van Zandt.
Yep.
And so I said yes, that I would after certain negotiations. And so I have regretted that. And what did I learn from that? That no is an answer.
Good. That's a good piece of life advice. Okay, number 3. My superpower is blank.
Oh, I have to say my superpower is that I like people. I genuinely like people. I can usually find something to like in most people. That has allowed me, Joe, to be a pretty superb networker. And so I have a pretty established network of people. My clients who I've had for many, many years, and my health issues have forced me into semi-retirement. But my wife will tell you, retired. This guy is not retired. But I have to say that most of my clients I had for 20 plus years, and the senior executives in those corporations became some of my very, very best friends. So it's relationships and networking. And I tell people that I mentor, and I like to mentor young people a lot, but I say to them, it doesn't matter who you meet, remember them. You never know where you're going to come across them again. And, I know of people who I've mentored, girls and boys, who are senior executives today in the major corporations and associations and it could be of great help to me in working on projects like SOS. So I like people. That's a superpower. And sometimes they reciprocate. And I turn that into being a pretty fine networker.
Good. Okay. Last question. Interesting to get a cancer survivor's take on this, but I've learned not to worry so much about blank.
Well, the small stuff.
Yeah.
You cannot bother me about the small stuff. And I used to be a real detailed guy and get involved in worrying about lots of detail, way too much. And since I've been given the second wind, I don't worry about that stuff anymore. And it's almost, it's a relief not to have to worry about it. But yeah. And my health, I don't worry about it as much as most people would think that I do. I've been through it all, so they can't hit me much harder.
Okay, Jess, I really appreciate your time and your insights today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks very much. And by the way, I've really enjoyed your program as well. And keep it up. Keep up the great work.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you again.
You're welcome.